I'm here at the best mortar competition. Let's learn how they fire a mortar.
How do you fire a mortar? I had the privilege of attending the best mortar competition at Fort Benning, Georgia, where I learned a lot about mortars and how to employ them. Stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to show you how to lay, aim, and ultimately fire a mortar. A mortar is usually a lightweight muzzle-fed cannon that typically fires at a high angle. It's composed of 4 segments: the cannon, which fires the round, the baseplate, which the cannon sits on, the bipod, which holds and aims the tube, and the sight for aiming. What's kind of neat here is that some mortars can be broken down and carried, so you can bring them up a mountain or into a forest. And since some mortars are pushed down to the company level, it gives company commanders a lot of options. Mortars are typically indirect fire weapons, meaning the crew usually doesn't see their target. They rely on observers and maps and math to hit something they can't even see, although they can directly lay onto a target in an emergency. The rounds typically come in from a high angle. That's why you can get my shirt, High Angle Hell, from Bunker Branding, so they can plunge down on trenches or onto a rooftop. You can also mix and match ammunition. Mortar bombs come in high explosive illumination and white phosphorus, so you can customize your fire support plan based on the needs of the mission. You got troops in the open? High explosive. You need to illuminate an area? We have that too with flares. You want to create a smoke screen or start fires? White phosphorus. While doing research for this video, I found on Ground News that there was a mortar app that works on Android smartphones. And this is why I pay for that service. They don't give it to me for free. I find stuff like that. Ground News is a news aggregator that helps me find stories I may have missed. It also helps you understand how stories are being covered on both the left and the right. In this case, no right-leaning outlets covered the story, and since I can see the news agency's ownership, average factuality rating, and bias, I know who's telling me what to think. The most important feature of Ground News is this blind spot report. It helps me discover stories I might have missed due to my own personal bias. For example, a homeless man went on a stabbing rampage in New York City. 0 outlets on the left covered that. Or did you know that the Trump administration halted an investigation into a U.S. senator's coal companies? 0 outlets on the right talked about that. So click the link in the description below, go to ground.news/Ryan, or hit the QR code somewhere up here to be better informed. And honestly, it makes a great Father's Day gift. I bought my dad a subscription because all he does is watch TV all day, and he's super misinformed. And maybe your family gatherings this year will be a lot smarter. Now, I have to say that there is a trope that drones are the weapons of the future and traditional infantry weapons such as mortars may not have a place in the modern battlefield. And what I learned is that nothing could be further from the truth. The fact is that drones don't work that well in bad weather. Cold degrades batteries. Excessive heat degrades them as well. You also have to bring them fuel for a generator to charge the batteries, which kind of puts out its own heat signature. And if you have a heat signature, you can be detected. And if you can be detected, well, you can be killed. And, you might be able to get the cost of a one-way attack drone down to maybe $5,000 if you're the U.S., but a 60mm mortar shell costs a little over $100 and has a kill radius of 28 meters. And you can't jam a mortar round with electronic warfare. The round might not look like much, but that 60mm mortar round has killed more bad guys since Vietnam than any other weapon in U.S. Army inventory. But I'll tell you what drones are good for, and that's to help spot for targets for mortars. Heck, when we tested drones as forward observers, 8 out of 9 120mm mortar rounds hit their target on the first try. So I certainly think drones have a place on the battlefield, and mortars do as well. In the U.S. Army, 2 60mm mortars are based in each light infantry company. This gives the company commander a lot of flexibility. Those mortars can support an attack, or they can dig in and use it to defend a position. They are light enough to be carried long distances, and each bomb weighs about 3 pounds or 1.35 kilograms. Max range for the 60mm mortar is 3,490 meters. Another neat thing with the 60 millimeter mortar is that it actually has two fire modes. One is a conventional drop fire. The other is a trigger fire. So you drop the round in, and then the mortarman kind of has a bubble level to sort of just estimate the range and manually trigger the mortar. And this would be useful if, let's say, you're on a patrol and suddenly you come under attack and you have to start shooting without having to set up the entire system. 81 millimeter mortars are a little heavier. The U.S. Army typically has 4 at some battalions. They pack a heavier punch, but they're still transportable on your back, just a little bit heavier. Those mortars reach out to 5,800 meters. And finally, there's the big daddy, the 120 millimeter mortar. This thing is a beast, weighs over 300 pounds. It's normally vehicle mounted, such as a Striker or an AMPV, although you can disassemble it and lug it someplace. You saw this a lot in Afghanistan, where combat outposts would use them to kind of reach over mountains and support units that were patrolling on the other side. These 120 millimeter mortar shells weigh between 31 and 36 pounds, and they can reach out to 7,200 meters. Now, I'll keep talking about mortar bombs. So what is a mortar bomb? Well, it's made of 5 components. You have a fuse, that's in the nose. You have the body, where you actually keep the explosive. You have a stabilizer tube for stability, a fin assembly for additional stability, and propellant charges known as increments, which are wrapped around the stabilizer tube. Now, if you take the propellant charges off, you'll see these things called flash holes. And I know I keep thinking of Spaceballs too. I'm surrounded by flash holes. But the flash holes actually surround the stabilizer tube. And here's the idea. At the very bottom of the mortar round, there's a primer. Not that much different than the primer at the back of a bullet. And when you drop the mortar round down the tube, the primer will hit a firing pin. The firing pin explodes, and that explosion travels through all those flash holes until they reach the propellant charges. This detonates the propellant charges and sends the round on its way. Quick note about the propellant charges. They're often called cheese charges because they, well, honestly, kind of look like little blocks of cheese. If you want the mortar round to go maximum range, you leave all of the cheese charges on. If you want to reduce the range, you pull some of the cheese charges off. That way there's less propellant going down the tube. You can even fire it with just the primer if you're extremely close. One quick thing to note, on some older Russian mortars, you see them actually tying the increments on. These are colloquially known as teabag charges, and Russia does that because it's just cheaper that way than tying them on at the factory. Now I want to talk about the fuse for a moment because this thing is really neat. The M734 fuse has 4 modes of fire: impact, delay, and then 2 different modes of proximity fusing, which will explode the round in midair. Impact is just what it sounds like. The bomb explodes when it hits something. You might use this if you're hitting targets in mud or snow. The delay setting is used when firing into wooded areas. It will delay an explosion by 0.05 seconds. That's in case the round hits a branch on the way down. The 2 proximity settings are near surface burst, which detonates the shell about 0.5 meter above the ground. You would use this for troops, let's say, in a trench. And then proximity detonates about 1 to 4 meters above the ground. You would use this for troops in the open or perhaps light vehicles. And this proximity mode is controlled by a tiny radar transmitter inside the fuse, which uses a Doppler radar set to the detonation height. The rounds come packaged in cardboard containers, colloquially known as Tootsies, because, yeah, they kind of look like Tootsie Rolls. Now, every mortar needs a mortar crew. In the U.S. Army, that job is called 11C, or 11 Charlie Mortarmen. Marines call their mortarmen 0341s. And by the way, if you know a mortarman, tell him to grab this High Angle Hell Mortarman shirt from Bunker Branding. Find that link below. Now, the mortar crew size depends on the type of mortar. 60 millimeter mortars have a team of 2, a gunner and an ammunition bearer. And the mortar is controlled by a section sergeant. And since there's 2 mortars and a light infantry company, they also have a squad leader who can oversee both teams. The gunner and the ammo bearer will carry 4 to 6 rounds each, which doesn't sound like a lot, but mission always dictates. And you know how many mortar bombs can fit on an infantryman? Plus, one more, right? Always one more. So typically the soldiers or Marines of the infantry company those mortarmen are attached to will carry 1 or 2 mortar rounds each, and they'll just kind of drop those rounds off of the mortar crew when the mortar is being employed. So that kind of gives an infantry company 180, maybe 190 rounds. That is an insane amount of firepower that is on call and ready to go and to destroy anything short of a tank. I mean, this isn't like calling an artillery support and you interrupt their lunch and you wait 10 minutes for fires. This is, I see an enemy patrol, I call the mortar squad leader, and then less than a minute, no more patrol. Now, if you also have the 81 millimeter mortar for crew, that's a little bit heavier. They typically have a gunner, an assistant gunner, and an ammo bearer, as well as a section leader overseeing it all, a squad leader. The 120s are a lot heavier and vehicle mounted, so they'll have the same setup as the 81 millimeter mortar, but also have an attached driver. Now, how do you actually aim this mortar? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. The first is by direct lay. You look through the sight, you find the bad guys, you figure out the distance, and then you use something like this, the whiz wheel, to calculate your elevation and charge. Another way to do it is digitally. You'd use the M32A1 lightweight handheld mortar ballistic computer, or if you're vehicle mounted, there's the MFCS or mortar fire control system. But in a degraded condition, you typically fall back to a stick. That's right. These candy-striped aiming poles are aligned one in front of the other and placed at 50 and 100 meters, although the further out you place the poles, the more accuracy you get. And the candy stripe actually doesn't mean anything. It's just there for visibility. For nighttime fires, you use a glow stick or an M58 aiming post light. The hand and arm signals used for setting up the mortar are called the dirty bird, where the gunner directs the assistant gunner on how to align the aiming posts. So now you know that the aiming posts are set up. How do you aim? Well, you adjust the sights so they align just to the left of the aiming pole, with these hash marks kind of eating in to the aiming pole like a hungry alligator. You also level the mortar by adjusting it until the leveling bubbles are centered. Now, we all know that there's 360 degrees in a circle, but the military uses a more precise unit of measurement called a mil or a milliradian instead of degrees. There's 6,400 mils in a military aiming circle. And since 1 mil of angle is 1 meter of width at 1,000 meters, that makes adjusting fire really mathematically easy. So for deflection, meaning left or right, and elevation, meaning up or down, we always use mils instead of degrees or angle. It's just more accurate. The 60 millimeter mortar is set with a baseline deflection of 2,800 mils and an elevation of 1,100 mils. Any call for a fire mission will be an adjustment from that baseline measurement. So how do you actually fire this thing? Well, typically the call will come to the squad leader or section sergeant either digitally or over the radio with a standard 6-line call for fire. This call for fire is a standard method of requesting artillery support that's taught to every soldier, which describes where the target is, what you want to hit, and how you want it destroyed. Now, if this is a unit of 81 millimeter or 120 millimeter mortars, you'll have an FDC or Fire Direction Center. And this would be a person who essentially sits in a command trailer and they coordinate and process and they plot the incoming requests for fire. The FDC will typically do this digitally using the MFCS or manually using a circular plotting board. If this company is a section of 60 millimeter mortars, which we watched, the FDC is the squad leader or section leader, and he'll use the lightweight handheld ballistic computer or a plotting board. And the actual call would go something like this. I'm going to demonstrate. In this case, Red 6 is the unit calling for fire, and also known as the observer, and Mighty is the name of the 60mm mortar unit.
Mighty, this is Red 6, adjust fire, over.
Red 6, this is Mighty, adjust fire, out.
This is what's called the warning order. It lets the mortar squad leader or section sergeant know that mortar fire is needed. Next, the observer gives a location. There's a couple of ways to do this. You could use pre-coordinated target reference points or TRPs, like, hey, fire on TRP 1. You might also use angle and distance from your location, but the most common way is just to send up a grid location of the bad guys like this.
Grid, Yankee Echo, 12302500, over.
Grid Yankee Echo 12302500, out.
Next, the observer gives a target description, a method of engagement, and a method of fire and control. The mortar needs a target description because they are going to judge how to best engage the target based on the type of fuses and ammunition they have at hand. Immediate suppression means that the troops are in contact right now, and that adjustment round needs to go out as fast as possible. So here's what this kind of sounds like.
Enemy infantry platoon in the open, immediate suppression, over.
Enemy infantry platoon in the open, immediate suppression, out.
Now the squad leader or section sergeant will call the fire mission out to the mortar team, and he'll usually yell that really loud. Even though immediate suppression is needed because we got troops in contact, the mortar team is only going to fire one round at first. When that round lands, the observer will let the mortar team know if any adjustments need to be made to get those mortar rounds on target. So the squad leader or the section sergeant will calculate the distance to the target as well as the deflection needed. They might use the lightweight handheld mortar ballistic computer, but if they don't have one, they'll use this whiz wheel to calculate charge and elevation. Now, this is basically a circular slide rule, and this has been used ever since 1859 when a French artillery officer named Amédée Mannheim invented this thing. Here's how it works. I set the outer portion of the wheel to the range I want. In this case, I'm setting it to 800 meters. Then I follow this line down until I hit the first curve. I follow the curve to the left, and inside I see a 1 inside a diamond. This means I need charge 1. So 3 cheese charges have to be removed from that round. Then I go back to the line. The number at the top part of the curve tells me the flight time is a little over 23 seconds. The number at the bottom part of the curve lets me know the elevation in mils, with each hash mark being an increase of 100 mils. So in this case, 1,270 mils of elevation. Now, the deflection left or right of the mortar was already calculated using the plotting board, and I've already calculated my deflection in mils as well. So the squad leader or section sergeant will now call to the mortar man.
Fire mission, HE quick, section 1, 1 round, deflection, tree forward, 00, charge 1, elevation, 1270.
And the gun team will repeat those comments back. Now a couple of things happen. The gunner takes a position on the left side of the mortar and makes adjustments in the sight for deflection and elevation. The gunner makes these adjustments on the sight, and then that points the sight off in a different direction. Now he has to realign the bipod with the aiming stakes to get the cannon on the target. Now your mortar is pointed in the right direction and the sight is aligned. This is important because mortars move when they are fired, so the gunner will have to check sight alignment after every single shot. Then the gunner responds, gun up. As this is happening, the assistant gunner on a 60mm mortar or the ammo bearer on an 81 or 120mm mortar will be removing any necessary increments. The round is then inspected by the squad leader or section sergeant, who will make sure that the correct amount of increments has been removed and the fuse is at the right setting. Then they will command the assistant gunner or ammo bearer to hang it.
I got 2!
The assistant gunner holds the round over the tube until the command to fire. At the command to fire, the gunner drops the round into the cannon and slides his hands down the tube to make sure they are far away from the bomb that's about to come out. As soon as the round comes out of the cannon, the gunner rechecks the lay of the gun against the aiming stake and makes any necessary adjustments. Then the squad leader or section sergeant will call over the radio.
Red 6, mighty shot over.
And the observer will reply,
Shot out.
This lets the observer know that the first round is headed downrange. Now remember, we know the time of flight from the whiz wheel, in this case 23 seconds. So 5 seconds before the round impacts, the squad leader or section sergeant will key the mic and say,
Red 6, mighty splash, over.
This lets the observer know the round is about 5 seconds from impacting, just in case the observer needs to take cover. And the observer will respond,
Splash out.
The round impacts. The observer will observe that round and send back any necessary corrections. In this case, let's say the round impacted 50 meters below the target. The observer might say,
Mighty, this is Red 6. Add 50.
Add 50 means the round landed a little short and you need to add 50 meters to your calculations. The squad leader will recalculate any adjustments, send that information to the gunner, who will then relay the gun. Then the command to fire for effect is issued. Now, there are entire tables for this, but an enemy infantry platoon in the open, you might fire 10 rounds rapid fire. Also note that after every 5 or 10 rounds, the assistant gunner will punch the bore of the cannon to clean out any particles or pieces of charge that failed to ignite. When the fire mission is finished, the squad leader or section sergeant will call over the radio.
Red 6, mighty. Rounds complete. Over.
And the observer will respond with,
Mighty, Red 6. Rounds complete. Out.
This is also the spot where the observer might call in the word repeat if more rounds are needed. It's why soldiers and Marines use the phrase say again over the radio if they didn't understand someone. It keeps the delineation for repeating a fire mission, the word repeat, different from, hey, I didn't understand you, say that again. Now, at this point, if the mortar isn't in a defensive emplacement, they'll often move or displace. Mortar rounds can be tracked by radar. They can even be tracked by drones. So the team will normally pick up and move. They'll displace to another location because all it takes is a little bit of math to figure out where that mortar came from. You know, at the end of the day, mortars aren't flashy. They're not stealth bombers or hypersonic missiles. They're a tube, a base plate, and a bunch of math. But they work. They work in the rain. They work in the cold when batteries die, GPS gets jammed. They still put firepower on target. And when you need firepower right now, the fastest way to solve that problem is still a steel tube pointed in the right direction. Yeah, there's a number of people I'd like to thank for contributing to this video. First off, Daniel Mernon, the public affairs specialist of Fort Benning. He walked us through the best mortar competition and opened a lot of doors for us. I'd also like to thank Sergeant First Class Daniel Cardenas, Staff Sergeants Mark Barnhill, Corey Grayson, Chase Perry, Nathaniel Tevis, and Brandon Reeves, who were kind enough to sit with me and explain how mortars work. Any mistakes I've made are strictly my own. Grab my high-angle hell shirt from Bunker Branding. Great gift if you're a mortarman or you love a mortarman, or even if you hate a mortarman, you should buy one too. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Oh man, I have to work in this skiff. Maybe I'll just take my phone in this skiff. Hey kid, what's going on? Think tank! You know, taking a phone into the skiff isn't cool. It could really hurt your friends. But a t-shirt or hoodie from Bunker Branding sure is cool. Wow! This meeting could have been signals intelligence. That's like every meeting. And Bunker Branding has all sorts of other merchandise. Intel Life, Aerosol, Live, Laugh, Launch for Destroyer, Trident, HIMARS, and Patriot. Think outside the bomb. Drone Suite Drone, Department of the Boat People, landmines, and even the tow missile. It would behoove you to grab one today. You know, I don't think you can smoke in here. Oh, I'm not smoking. I'm just holding a lit cigarette in my mouth. Now I know. And knowing is half the battle.